So Sunday night was the final Ontario leaders debate between PC leader Doug Ford, NDP leader Andrea Horwath, and Liberal leader Kathleen Wynne. Now, before I get to the clips of this debate and the stuff I want to highlight, I want to point out that the Green Party was not invited, but despite that, Mike Schreiner in Guelph, who's the Green Party leader, is currently in the lead in that riding in polling. So if you're in Guelph, a vote for Green would not be a wasted vote. You could actually elect the first Green MPP in Ontario. So letting you know before I get to the bulk of this debate, which does not include the Green Party leader. Now, let me get to this debate. So there was, this was fun. This was entertaining. And you know what? Watching this, you are going to learn some stuff. So the first three clips, I'm just going to play out the intros or the opening statements from each of the party leaders. But then we're going to dive into some fact checking and really correct some things that were said and not said. So let's start off with Doug Ford, PC leader Doug Ford, and his opening statement in this final debate.
Well, thank you very much for having us. My friends, you know me. I'm for the little guy. I'm for the people. I'm here to tell you the PC plan, a plan to clean up the hydro mess and reduce your hydro rates by 12%, a plan to put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket by reducing your income tax by 20%, making sure that we reduce gasoline tax by 10 cents a liter. My plan is to create great paying jobs and nobody will be laid off. Our plan is to reduce and get rid of hallway healthcare. My plan is to bring honesty, integrity, and transparency back to the government. You don't have to choose between bad when it comes to the Liberals or 10 times worse when it comes to the NDP. Our government is for the people, and a new day will dawn in Ontario, a day of opportunity, prosperity, and growth.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. That is your time. I will turn it over to...
Okay, so a few things here. Doug Ford in this debate definitely appeared a lot more coached or trained. A lot more, the way he delivers his statements, he is, I don't know how to describe it, more like a politician and less like the drunk that walked on stage. So you could view that as a good thing or a bad thing. So a lot of Doug Ford's popularity is due to the fact that he comes off as a regular guy, even though, you know, he's a millionaire who inherited his business from his dad. His dad was an MPP. His brother was a mayor. He himself was a Toronto councillor. So this is a man who is part of the insiders. He is an insider. He is an elite. Yet he pretends to be against it, much like Donald Trump was. Except Donald Trump didn't have the connections politically that Doug Ford has. Now, let me get to Andrea Horwath's opening statements here before I get to any more corrections on what Doug Ford has been saying.
There's something special happening in Ontario, and everywhere I go, I can feel it. People are saying that things are going to change and that they want to see something different for the future. People are saying that they don't want to see the same old solutions from government. They know that we can have change that makes people's lives better. We don't have to accept what's been happening. We don't have to go from bad to worse. We can end hallway medicine in our province. We can make sure that every child has the education that they need. We can do so much better, and we can do that together. You know what? It doesn't have to be the way it is in this province. And I know that together we can make change that makes people's lives better. I'm confident that we can do that together on June 7th. Thank you.
So NDP leader Andrea Horwath's opening was fine. I think she does a lot better in the actual bulk of the debate, but it's a good, hopeful message, and I think she laid out well what her plan for Ontario is. Now let's get to Liberal leader and current Premier Kathleen Wynne's opening statements.
Government isn't about winning power. It's about using the power that you're given to make a lasting difference in people's lives. And my opponents love to talk about my record, and so do I. So here's what I want to say about the last 5 years. Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better. I'm not sorry that we're covering tuition for 235,000 students. I'm not sorry that we're protecting the environment. And I'm really not sorry that we're no longer asking single moms to raise a family on $11.40 an hour. We've created nearly 1 million jobs, and we've got a plan for better hospital care, better home care, and better child care that builds on that success. I'm not sorry that we're making an economy that works for everyone, not just for a few.
So I actually think that Kathleen Wynne had the best opening here. Now, it does come off as, kind of staged. This sorry, not sorry is clearly, a rehearsed line that she's now using throughout her re-election campaign. But that said, she did lay her platform out in a good way, kind of separating herself from the party and what she has done, or what the party has done in the province. So because she's so unliked and Liberals are right now way behind in polling, this was a good way to try and separate her lack of popularity from the Liberal Party. But we're going to see if it actually has any effect on polls. And it just, at this point, seems very unlikely that Kathleen Wynne is going to win re-election. Now, let's get to the bulk of this debate, where there is some fun stuff. So let's start off with this clip here, where Ford is talking about how he has saved the taxpayers' money.
I also have a proven track record. When I say I'm going to do something, we've done it. Under the City of Toronto, we saved the taxpayers over $1.16 billion, and not one single person lost their job. And under our government, I'm going to reinforce this, not one single person will lose their job.
Okay, so I have a couple things to say here, and this is a line that Doug Ford uses quite a bit. Now, he talks about how he saved the taxpayers' money. Well, to be fair, he says we saved the taxpayers' money. And what he means is that him and his brother did. I mean, the reality is his brother was the mayor, Doug Ford was a councillor. Now, how much impact he had on Rob, it's really anyone's guess. You can say he had a lot or he had a little. But let's say he had a massive impact on Rob Ford's administration as mayor in Toronto. Well, here's the fact, the actual fact about Doug Ford and his proposed, or his claim that he helped save Toronto taxpayers $1.1 billion. As Justin Ling, freelance journalist, points out, Doug Ford just said that he saved the City of Toronto $1.1 billion and nobody lost their job. That is an absolute lie. It's wildly untrue. Within that $1.1 billion figure is a $200 million tax cut and a $750 million in cost reductions that involved significant layoffs. Never mind that spending at the City of Toronto increased over the 4 years of the Fords. That lie is just so beyond the pale. And I asked Ford point blank how he keeps using that $1.1 billion figure, even though it's bunk. He completely refused to answer, and later went back to it and cited his cost-cutting record at City Hall. Now, sure, you could say, oh, well, this journalist says it, maybe the journalist is lying. Okay, how about we go to Toronto City Manager Joe Penichetti, who worked under the Rob Ford administration and knows how much money Toronto actually saved. So this was from an interview with Toronto Life. The problem is that you can't just make a general statement and try to educate the public by saying, quote, I cut $1 billion over my 4 years. It was misleading, and I tried to correct it. Unequivocally, he did not save tax dollars of $1 billion. It was $350 million that we saved. I'll say that. So that's a quote from an interview during Joe Penichetti's retirement, who was the city manager under Rob Ford. And he is clearly stating that that $1 billion figure is a lie. So this isn't just from, some fake news journalist. This is from the guy who was actually working on the budget. Now, let's go to the next clip here where the leaders are debating trust.
There's one person who has a proven record of saving the taxpayers' money. We don't make mistakes in our budget. We don't make $7 billion mistakes.
Do you have a plan?
We don't cook the books to $12 billion.
Okay, let's hear Andrea Horvath's response.
We make sure we keep our promises.
Let's give Andrea a chance to respond. Andrea Horvath.
So we did admit that there was a mistake, and we fixed it right away. It's nowhere near what Mr. Ford's talking about, but there you go. Inflating of numbers when we haven't even seen any numbers from Mr. Ford. People started voting yesterday, Mr. Ford. Where is your platform? Where is your respect for the people now when they're already at the polls and you haven't provided them any information about what it is that you plan to do in our province? What are you going to cut?
Kathleen
What
Wynne's
is going to
turn.
suffer
Kathleen
from Mr.
Wynne,
Ford's
please.
cuts?
Okay, so a couple things here. First off, Doug Ford is saying that there is a $7 billion hole in Andrea Horvath's budget, which, of course, Doug Ford is inflating numbers. Here's what actually happened. Ontario NDP leader Andrea Horvath admits to a $1.4 billion hole in her spending plan. So there was a $1.4 billion error in her budget, and the NDP immediately corrected it. Unlike Doug Ford, when anytime he's caught saying something incorrect, he simply runs away from the questions. Now, the other side of this is that Doug Ford and the PCs don't even have a platform. So he has no ground to stand on to really attack anybody else. As Nick Klishta tweeted out, the NDP platform is 98 pages. The Liberal platform is 64 pages. And the PC platform is 60 words. It should be mandatory to publish a platform to run a campaign. And even an editorial in the conservative newspaper, the Toronto Sun, admitted to this, forcing them to rely on professional estimates on what Doug Ford's plan might actually cost. Former chair of TD Bank, Don Drummond's analysis shows the Ontario Doug Ford Party, formerly the PC Party of Ontario, would increase the deficit and debt more than any of the three main parties. And while no party is as hawkish as Drummond would like, he finds the NDP's plan would add the least debt. It's not clear how the Conservatives' plan adds up, if indeed it does, writes Drummond. Ford would increase rather than eliminate the deficit, he adds, estimating a Doug Ford Party government would add $2.1 billion to the deficit. And this is likely why Doug Ford has not released a platform, because his plan would add more to both the debt and the deficit than both the parties to the left of him. Now, let's go to this next clip where Kathleen Wynne hits both Doug Ford and Andrea Horvath.
Yeah, and I think, Doug, nobody has any idea what those 10, 12, 14, we don't even know what the number is, $1 billion worth of cuts would mean to the people of this province. What we do know is that education and healthcare would be hurt. There is absolutely no way that you can take billions of dollars out of the services that are provided in this province and not hurt education and healthcare. And I'm only standing here tonight because I got involved in provincial politics because of what Mike Harris was doing in this province, cutting across government, which is exactly what, Doug, you have proposed. And I would just say to you, Andrea, that, to suggest that somehow the economy is not growing in Ontario and people are not finding a life that they can be proud of is just not the case. Of course we can do better. Of course that there's more that we can do. But to suggest that there hasn't been improvement since Mike Harris was the Premier is just not the case.
But Kathleen, the question was about trust. And I was in the legislature the day that you said straight to my face that you had no intention of selling off Hydro One. And then what did you do? A couple of months later, you started selling off Hydro One. That goes straight to trust, Kathleen.
I'm going to have to stop the discussion now because...
Goddamn. So Kathleen Wynne made some good shots there at Doug Ford, but then got absolutely stomped by Andrea Horvath. So that issue of trust, Horvath is exactly right. Kathleen Wynne moved to the right in her selling off of Hydro One. Privatization of a public service is a conservative move. And what happened in result of that? Higher hydro bills for everyone in Ontario. So that's what you get with a Liberal government, always moving to the right. And what you get with the PC government is just absolutely on the right. So Doug Ford would have done the exact same thing and actually likely would have sold off more of Hydro One than Kathleen Wynne did. So don't be fooled in thinking that Doug Ford is going to lower your hydro rates. They will increase. Doug Ford wants to privatize everything. So the services will not only get worse, they'll also get more expensive. Now, let's go to the next clip here where Andrea Horvath or Doug Ford talks about how you should ask your boss who to vote for.
Ford, you talk
Your
about being
plan is
for
coming
the
from the
people.
middle
You
class,
talk about being for
about
the people,
reducing taxes.
but your
That's what
plan
our plan
is for
is.
the rich. Your plan is going to give
our plan's for the little guy.
$1,200 to the rich,
You know,
and $18 to everyday
the NDP
families.
talk a
You
good
can't
game.
even
Ms.
get a
Horvath,
club pack
let's
of
let him
chicken for
respond.
My
18
words,
bucks.
Let's let him respond,
friends.
Ms. Horvath.
So,
My friends, do me a favor, the people listening at home. Go to your employer on Monday.
You're not being honest,
Go to
Mr.
your
Ford.
employer on Monday and ask them one question from Doug Ford. What would happen to my job? God forbid the NDP ever got in. I know the answer. They'd be gone because
And then-
125,000
Mr.
jobs
Ford,
are
Mr.
lost.
Ford, let's
Okay. Now, there's two parts in this clip that I'm going to break down. The first part here is that Doug Ford says he's for the little guy. Oh, I'm Doug Ford. I'm for the little guy, even though I'm an elite myself and I pretend not to be. But yeah, I'm for the little guy. But you know what? Maybe he is. Maybe his platform is for the little guy. But as Angie Horvath pointed out there, quote, your plan is for the rich. You would give $1,200 to the rich and $18 to everyday families. Now, let me fact check that to see if it's actually true. So, senior economist Sheila Block spoke with Global News saying this. It's not middle class or middle income families who are going to do the best from this, Block said. Individuals making more than $109,000 annually would get 49% of the benefit of this tax cut, according to Block. Quote, for somebody making between $39,000 and $49,000, they save $18 annually, she said. You compare that to someone who is making more than $109,000 a year, they come out more than $1,168 ahead. If you make less than $43,000, this has no positive effect on you, Block said. So, Andrea Horvath's math on this checks out. Doug Ford's plan would benefit the rich more than it would benefit the poor or middle class. Now, the perfect the perfect opposite to what Doug Ford was saying there at the beginning is the end of that clip. Ask your boss who to vote for. So, Doug Ford is for the little guy, but he's asking you to ask your boss who you should vote for. Doesn't that kind of tell you who Doug Ford is running a campaign for? Who his platform is going to benefit once he actually finds a platform? He is clearly running for the rich, the wealthy, the well-connected, the elites. The exact people he claims to be against, he is asking you to ask them who you should vote for. Incredible. Now, the end of that clip, Ford is claiming that businesses will leave Ontario if NDP wins.
My friend, I travel around and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of companies. They are terrified of the NDP coming in. They've told me personally, we will pack up and we will go down south in half a second. God forbid the NDP ever get in. They will destroy our province and destroy
You're such a scaremonger.
our
And
economy.
that's our time for
Absolutely
this
destroy it.
question. Thank
That's
you.
fact.
Well, the very funny part about this is that Doug Ford runs a business. So will he bring his business? Will he leave Ontario if the NDP forms government? Somebody asked him that after the debate, and here was his response.
Why don't you want to answer the question? Why don't you want to answer the question? So the NDP wins, you keep deco labels here, or do you move it to the States?
Well, again, my friends, I'm focused on winning this election because when we...
You're not answering the
You're
question.
asking me a hypothetical question.
You created the
So
hypothetical.
But you complain.
I can tell you, my friend.
The NDP won. Therefore, it's not a hypothetical
actually,
question, it's
you
a
know something, my
scenario
friends, I'm
we're
just,
setting up.
I'll answer a question this way. When I crisscross Ontario, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of businesses, they are terrified, absolutely terrified.
What an honest guy. Doug Ford is is blatantly not answering the question. He even says it. Oh, I'll answer it this way. He could just say, hey, if NDP is going to form government, yes, they will force companies to move. And yes, I'm going to move my company south of the border because that's what I claimed the NDP government is going to force companies to do. Clearly, Doug Ford is full of shit. If he won't move his own company south of the border if the NDP form government, then he knows that nobody else will. It's just an empty talking point to fearmonger and scare you into not voting for the NDP. Now, let's go to, there's two more clips here. So let's go to this clip where Doug Ford is talking about how he doesn't like politicians.
Well, Bob, I appreciate the question because I don't trust politicians either. I say that publicly. I don't see eye to eye with a bunch of politicians. I'm the only person up here that actually, Bob, has a track record of what we say we're going to do, we did. We said we're going to save the taxpayers money in the city of Toronto. We saved them $1.16 billion.
Okay, so I already showed you how that $1.16 billion savings in Toronto is a complete lie. But the other half of that is that Doug Ford doesn't like politicians. But as I said, Doug Ford's dad was an MPP. His brother was the mayor of Toronto. His nephew is a Toronto city councillor, and Doug Ford himself was also a Toronto city councillor. Yet, he continues to try and pretend that he is not a politician. How can anybody buy this? What Doug Ford is doing here is being a typical politician. He's lying through his teeth. And he expects you to be dumb enough to not know that he is well connected. He inherited his business from his dad. His dad was an MPP. His entire family is immersed in politics. Yet he somehow is against the elites, against politicians. Give me a fucking break. Now, let me show you the last clip here, which is kind of funny. And actually, Doug Ford gets in a little jab here at the end that is kind of good. But watch.
You want to put your children in a government daycare, or do you rather have a choice? We believe in letting the people have a choice rather than the government telling you where you should have your son or daughter taken care of.
How much is your rebate, Doug? How much is your rebate? About $2,000. It's not going to help with your $20,000 of childcare costs.
And by the way, you don't have to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 because we know the government shuts down after 4:30, 5 o'clock. Oh. If you work night times, you work afternoons.
Have you ever been to a daycare?
You will be able to.
Apparently not.
4:30.
I'm planning to go down to Queen's Park.
That's our time, leaders.
Okay, so this was maybe the most entertaining part of the entire debate. Just a couple jabs back and forth. So Doug Ford clearly has no idea that government-run daycares don't close at 4:30 p.m. So Kathleen Wynne asks him, have you ever been to a daycare? Because it's quite clear that Doug Ford has not. A rich guy like him doesn't have to go to a daycare to take care of his children. He has people to do that for him. Now, Doug Ford, to his credit, does come back saying, yeah, I'm planning to head down to Queen's Park, which is where the Parliament of Ontario works. So a funny jab back at Kathleen Wynne, but still, the point here is that Doug Ford doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Now, after this debate, it is now Tuesday today. Where do the polls stand? So let me show you. So CBC Poll Tracker has the averages of all the polling, showing that both the PC and NDP are up, with PC up 0.07% and the NDP up 0.12%. But the PC still have the lead, with the NDP barely trailing by 0.2%. So while Doug Ford just completely blew the lead that the Conservatives had, they're still up right now after this debate by 0.7%, which shows that they have not completely lost momentum. They're still in this, and the NDP still have to fight for the potential of forming government on June 7th. So right now, I think it's clear that the Liberals are out of this. So really, depending on your riding, your vote, if you're a progressive, should be going to the NDP in most cases. Though if you're in Guelph, I say a vote for the Green Party would be a good vote. And if you're in much of the 905, voting for the Liberals might also be a good vote, though NDP also have a chance of picking up some of those seats. So it's still anyone's game, except for the Liberals. Kathleen Wynne is very unlikely to remain Premier of Ontario after June 7th. So keep that in mind when you go to the polls. And I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this debate and who you plan to vote for on June 7th. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.